Do 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 do.
I can't believe it's been a year since I sat here and first looked at that. Well, it hasn't been a year, it's been a bit more than that. It's 13 and a half months, but it doesn't quite have the same ring to it, does it? I remember sitting here, looking at the fields and the garden and the bush, thinking, what have I gotten myself into? And if I'm honest, I still think that. But things have happened. A lot has happened, even though sometimes it doesn't feel like it, and things happen slowly around here. We have done quite a bit, and I thought, well, 12 months is as good a time as any to have a bit of a tour and see what we've done. It's as good for me as it is for you, I think. So let's go for a walk. Let's start with the pièce de résistance, the berry patch, which is now fully enclosed and fully planted. Now this started life as a series of old polytunnels which were quite run down, and we ummed and ahed a lot about whether or not we'd try and salvage them or get rid of them and start again. As you can see, we got rid of them and started again, other than the perimeter fencing, which we made floppy and then used as the boundary for the garden. And I know it's looking a little bit overgrown at the moment, but actually it's coming together really well. Now, true to its name, there are a lot of berries in this berry patch. We've got raspberries, we've got blueberries, we've got boysenberries, we've got young berries, we've got strawberries, we've got currants. Not sure if they're technically a type of berry or not, but they come, in fact, there's fruit on those, which is very exciting. There are some things that aren't berries as well. I know there are some potatoes in the ground over here. There's potatoes everywhere, aren't there? Beans, tomatoes. Fairly sure these are capsicum of some sort, although I'm not 100% on those. But really, this is such a good space. I'm really pleased with how it's come together, and now it's just a matter of seeing how animal proof it is when it's full of food. Now this is the other pièce de résistance, a fully enclosed Espaliered apple orchard, which doesn't quite roll off the tongue, but it's an apt description of what it is. I've already done a couple of videos on the construction, so I won't go into that in too much detail, but we've got posts that I've put in on this side with a net strung over to the boundary fence, and then there's a bit of an apron around the edge as well. So we've got 8 varieties of apple and 2 varieties of pear, and we've paired each of them up into rows that will espalier, and I've put the wires between these posts in the middle and the ones that are on the outside. So the rationale behind doing that was mainly for space, because it's a bit neater and a bit more orderly if we can just put them in nice rows. They won't grow out everywhere, and we can make sure that they all get good sunlight. And it means that we can access the fruit fairly easily as well when we go to pick them. But what it's meant is we've got this extra space in between while they're growing. They're not too bushy, and so we've put these extra garden beds in here. Now, I admit that I did that under a little bit of protest, but it's actually a pretty good idea, because we've got this extra growing space that's also enclosed. At the end of those, we've even been able to put some citrus in, and the plan is to espalier them along the back wall, and that'll get that northern light as well. And because of the angle of these rows, there's actually a triangular bed at each end. Again, just more growing space in this enclosure, which, as we know, with all the animals around here, is very helpful. You'll also notice how free of grass and weed this whole space is. That's because under it all is a layer of cardboard. We really went to town in here, but it's paid dividends, because it's, we've picked a few things out, but it's nothing like what we saw down in the berry patch, for example. So that's a big tick for no-dig gardening, and I suspect we'll pursue that when we do some other stuff, in the future. Well, how about we start heading down the hill and see what else we've been up to. We'll just pause here. So a little while ago, I was messing around with an old bit of water tank and trying to turn it into a, a small raised garden bed that we could cover with some netting or wire to keep pests out. And that's worked really well. In fact, it's still working well. It's got some rocket in it, it's got beetroot, garlic. They're all growing in there, but it's just not very tall, and so obviously it limits how much the crops that are in there can grow. So went looking for some other solutions, and I came up with this. It is just another raised garden bed, but bigger in almost every way compared to the other one. It's built in an old apple box, and I got this from one of the local orchards around here. They were just getting rid of them. A lot of orchards get rid of their apple boxes when they're not fit for stacking and whatever else. So if you've got one nearby, you could pick up a bargain. But we got that, and I just built this extra structure over the top of it to enclose it. Obviously, that's the whole point, is wanting to keep the pests out. And it's worked very well so far. Obviously, it's got a lot of extra height compared to the old one. I think it's quite a clever little design, actually, because when you open it right up, the lid just sits on top like that. You can get access to whatever you're growing in there. The real genius isn't that, it's that you can actually open it from both sides. So if you've got short little arms and can't reach the back, maybe this design is for you. And people laugh at me when I say I'm going to build something. I keep forgetting about these hazelnuts. We bought them with the rest of the fruit trees and put them along the fence line here as a nice boundary feature, and have pretty much neglected them since. Despite that, though, they seem to be doing quite well. I say quite well, they're alive, which is good. There's 3 varieties of them, which I'm told is good for pollination, but it's really the extent of my knowledge of hazelnuts, except for the fact that they are part of chocolate. So hopefully they'll still be alive next time I remember they exist. Finally got around to building that wood pile. Yeah, so this is really the great procrastination. It's the frame from the old polytunnel that was up where the berry patch is now. And we moved it down here quite a long time ago with a view to it being part of a larger enclosed space that would be, a kitchen garden with veggies and herbs, all that sort of thing. But it's been on the back burner for a long, long time for a few reasons. And I've been through them before, but in case you missed them, the fencing that I had going was designed to be possum-proof, and I'm sure it would be to a degree, but I think we want to put a much more substantial enclosure all around it, a bit like what we've done elsewhere, just because we've seen how voracious the possums and other creatures really can be. So that's kind of the future for down here, but at the moment we have done something. It's not completely empty. We've got a few rows of potatoes in there, so you probably can't see it from back here, but there is a net across it and some of that marine netting around the edging. And then I've just put a makeshift gate and front wall on it as well. So hopefully that'll be enough to keep them out of the potatoes, because I don't think potatoes are particularly tasty for a lot of creatures, but now I've said that, watch them disappear overnight. We do have other things growing down in this bottom orchard though, because this is the bottom orchard, even though it's the top orchard, which is just one of those things. But down here, we've got a few trees in the ground, which is quite exciting. When we first moved here, a friend of mine said, "Oh, wait till you start naming your paddocks, because apparently you name them and the names just stick, and it doesn't matter if they make any sense or not. That's just what they are, and they're that forever." And I thought, oh, okay. Anyway, this is the top orchard paddock, despite the fact that it wasn't really even an orchard when we first moved in, and it's actually the bottom paddock of the 2 paddocks that have orchards in them, so go figure. But it is a bit of an orchard that we've got going here, which is quite good, because we always had this idea of having a bit of a fruit forest thing going on, and that kind of came unstuck when we realised we're probably going to have to cover things and enclose them rather than just, be able to traipse through it like a little sprite through the forest. But we've got a few things growing here in a couple of small enclosures just for now, and I think the view again with this area is to eventually cover the whole lot in as well, but one step at a time. I'll just talk you through what we've got. There's a cherry tree here, Simone cherry, with a cherry on it. Won't go very far, but it's a good start. green gauge, which is probably the greatest thing I'd never heard of until we'd moved down to Tasmania. It's a type of plum, but apparently doesn't have a very big shelf life, so you really need to eat them fresh or make a jam out of them, which is what we've done, and I think we've almost finished our last jar of that, so time to start cooking again. What else have we got? I can't remember what type. I think it's a damson plum down the end, so a couple of those down here. And I think for these and a couple of the other stone fruits that we've got, it was good to have a couple of varieties for cross-pollination. We've got a peach, we've got elderberry. I don't even really know what to do with that. So I heard actually it's a weed, so maybe we'll just not mention that. But then almond up the top as well. We've got some of the old things still here, so there's the mulberry, which produced quite a bit of fruit last season. Hopefully that'll do that again. And down here, these are the old orchard trees that were here when we first moved in. And we gave them that first spring to see if anything was going to grow, and that didn't happen. So we pruned it right back. There is some regrowth on them, so maybe they'll come back strongly this season, but even if they don't, there's quite a wide variety of things that we've got down here, and the conditions are fantastic for this sort of thing. So holding out hope that this is going to be a really productive little space in the garden. Oh well, there you go, hey? 12 months plus a bit of very amateur work. Have we actually done that much? I don't know. It feels like we've done a lot of work. But I do know that there's still plenty more to do, plenty more bumbling, that's for sure. So stay tuned, get right on it. Some caffeine first. It's good.
Do 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 do.